Good morning, everyone. Today we're very excited to present the development process that went into making this game called Agony Horn, especially the generative AI tools that we use for doing this. And first, just to give a bit of background on all five of us, the five of us are doing PhD on what's called the IGI program in the UK, which stands for Intelligent Games and Games of Intelligence. We all have different sort of experience and backgrounds, and this game was originally made as part of the IGI Game Jam, which happens every year. So we made it in 48 hours, and it also builds on a previous game with similar themes. And we were also inspired by Astrologaster in particular, because that has sort of game mechanics around clients coming to you for advice. And as part of the Game Jam, we actually won the Best Narrative Award, which was voted for by the students. So that was some really nice feedback that we got from playtesters. So now get some more kind of background on the game itself.
Yeah. It is my brain.
There you go. Thank you.
So the name Agony Haunt comes from a spooky play on the word agony aunt, because in the game the player is a mystic who has clients come to her with various situations, and so the player as the mystic must choose which response to give to the client. So it's an interactive novel, basically. So it's a narrative game. Digital interactive novel, which is set in the late Victorian era. And the player plays from the perspective of the mystic. So there are 3 outcomes of the game, depending on how you answer. But we'll let you find that out when you play. The game's going to be in the demo session at 5:30, I think. So this is just a screenshot of one of the screens from the game. Just give you an idea of the kind of feel and aesthetic of it.
Thank you very much, Amy. So one thing we wanted to focus on first was the narrative. So because we knew we wanted to kind of focus on this period, we started looking and doing some initial desk research to kind of begin sort of archival content, try to find some inspiration from Florence. Working at the British Library is very useful. And we knew we wanted to do this like Victorian agony aunt idea, and sort of trying to sort of find, well, what real world examples can we actually use in the game? So we initially kind of went to ChatGPT3 at the time to begin kind of identifying some divination methods and some scenarios to do that and sort of begin the iterative process of generating scenarios, which basically was a collaborative and consistent approach because there was myself and Florence doing all of the narrative, and between us we kind of identified that actually between us using ChatGPT and creative writing we could kind of deliver some consistent approach. But you needed human curation because, as we will find out, we kind of realized, are we making something of the period or for the period? So we can start to see, I basically was tasked initially to start creating historical scenarios and kind of getting stuff. And its initial responses are, quote, sassy. Literally, I said, write a love spell for a Victorian woman to use to make a noble gentleman fall in love with her. And as you can see, it says, I am sorry, but I'm not able to provide you with a love spell. Very awkward. So we were like, okay, that's kind of annoying. But we were like, okay, is this how the model interprets like an ethical dilemma? If you're a human and you're writing something for a game, you know that you have context, but the model doesn't have that. So we're like, okay, and because we're still unsure about how much data and where it's coming from, is this how it's a generative archive of how it understands this prompt? So we're like, let's keep going. So we started doing some more iterative processes of prompts. Again, still not giving me any scientific basis. It's like, it's still not real. Stop doing this. And then finally, we kind of went very explicit in a fantasy setting, hypothetically, can you make this? And finally, after about 5 attempts, I finally got my love spell. And this was a challenge in itself. So it definitely is interesting to kind of work on, but it's obviously we can discuss how it reflects the past in more detail. And then sort of a comparison to creative writing, Florence sort of said, well, let me try one myself. So our first one, The Curse of the Crystal Scarab, was a documentary, commentary on Victorian colonial practices, #WellAwkward. And we were like, okay, this is written and we're kind of doing this sort of, play on sort of the fact that this was quite bad. We weren't sure if ChatGPT can actually offer satire, and it's something that if we were going to do this again, we would try to see if we could offer commentary and be critical of the period rather than just having instructions. So something for future endeavors, but something interesting that we noticed in building the game. And I'll let Amy get on with this.
Yes, so the other AI technique that we used to build the game was using Midjourney to create the art assets for the game, as you saw a bit of on the previous slides. So I basically was in charge of that. And just wanted to say that, obviously, because it's sort of an interactive novel, wanted it to feel illustrative, particularly book illustrations, and wanted to obviously capture the late Victorian era. Also wanted to build up a sense of the world, obviously, and the main character, of the mystic, of the player. Also wanted to feel obviously historical, but acknowledge that it's fiction and sort of exercise a bit of artistic license there as well. Do I need to press this? Wrong way. There we go. So just for anyone who hasn't used Midjourney, this is a quick sort of snapshot of the interface. You can see the prompt at the top there. As a result of entering the prompt, it's interpreted that, giving us 4 sketches, and then from there you can upscale one of the sketches to make it larger and more detailed, or you can create a variation of one of the sketches which will generate another 4 images based on that initial sketch. So the process of creating the images was iterative in a similar way of how the prompts needed to be iterated on to get to where Sahar was talking about they needed to be for some of the text. So with the iterations, it was really a sort of cycle of interpretation. So the model's interpreting the words that you're giving it, you're getting an image back, you're sort of making judgments given your goals on how those images are looking, and then iterating on your prompts. And that kind of cycle just goes on until you kind of get somewhere where you feel like it's the right place to be. So this is just a bunch of the images from the game, just to give you an idea of some of the other assets. So we've got the palmistry, the devil. These 2 portraits at the front are the mystic, so that's the player's character. So just to reflect on this process a little bit, just this idea of interpretation is important to kind of appreciate. And that the image, I wanted to just pick up on the image, that the image generation process from Midjourney is definitely capable of substantial innovation of the visual elements that it creates. And in doing so, it kind of inspires you as someone interpreting that image to kind of have these lateral modes of creativity. So it sparks other ideas, which can then kind of feed in to the prompts that you're giving the model. Midjourney doesn't really resist in the same way that GPT-3 does, so it's not really sassy or anything like that, which is kind of useful, I guess. Just to finish off this section, I wanted to sort of note that there was a lot of stuff in the images that I didn't prompt for explicitly, so you could infer from that that the model has some understanding of the era visually, of the late Victorian era. For instance, I didn't specify what the mystic should be wearing, but it often got the fashion sort of in the ballpark, and things like interior decoration and stuff like that. So I'll pass on to Sunny now to talk about the animation in the game.
Yeah, hold both. Yep. So on top of the images, from the images Amy generated, I was in charge of animating it. I don't know if that animation is supposed to work, but just an example. So because this was done in a game jam, we had really limited time. So in keeping with the theme, we decided to, you know what, let's go with an AI tool to also animate this. It's not generative as such, but it was really quick and easy to use. So we use this tech called Pixemotion, which is essentially just an app on your laptop or phone. And in fitting with like the keywords like mystic, powerful, spiritual, and the game kind of focuses on using these tools of divinations for readings back in as a mystic. So the animation focuses on the power that these tools kind of like give out more so than the actual mystic herself. So it gave kind of like visual depth to the game really quickly, and therefore, hence, you get a really good looking game off an AI generated image based off an AI engine, essentially. So that was me really quickly. I'm going to pass on to Callum, who is going to take you through the putting everything together phase.
If I don't drop the microphone?
Yes.
Okay. Where'd the microphone actually go? Into my thumb. Great. Hopefully you can now hear me again. Success. Right. That one? That one? Okay, cool. Success. Right. So now talking a bit about the technology and production. So some nice strengths of it. It's really quick compared to a human at creating specific art styles. It can rapidly iterate on ideas, and at the moment it's really cheap. At some point they're all going to get paywalled. There are, however, two categories of issues, and these are solvable issues, where it's like, oh yeah, at some point somebody will fix this, and then the other category is, these are fundamental issues to the current approach of generative models. The solvable issues are, it's really difficult to have a continuity of a character. You can't really get the AI to be like, oh, this is the same person you generated for us 5 generations ago. We had to kind of limit that. You can do it, it just takes a lot of work. At the moment, there's a limited range of generatable assets. Obviously, we only needed 2D images with like simple animation on the top. 3D model generation is currently a lot more specific and more difficult. Assets are typically very large in size and require post-processing if you need to care about things like optimization or running on smaller platforms. Some fundamental issues, continuity of world writing. Large language models are not currently capable of writing longer paragraphs of text on the scale of pages. We got around this by having quite short segment snippets. Editing is usually necessary, and sometimes it just talks nonsense. There are also anachronism machines. Depending on your historical expertise, you'll pick up more or less anachronisms that it's put in there. You'll be conscious or not conscious of some of them. Specific styles are beyond their reach. Generative AI cannot do pixel art because of specifics of the generation I can talk about later. There's also significant environmental concerns and artist compensation concerns because it involves not paying people and stealing their art. Final thoughts. Generative AI can be a tempting tool for short time frame projects. If you're building anything digital, you're probably going to get somebody looking at your money being like, hey, can we pay you less if you use generative AI to make this thing? It will present an interpretation of human-generated data to then be interpreted by you for use. It's a useful process when reflecting on the past for game design purposes, for asset generation and narrative design, and generative AI as a black box generative archive. Human curation is important for asset generation and narrative design. These are potentially powerful tools to augment human creativity, not replace human creativity. Done. And we didn't get any guns pointed at us. Great.